Hello everybody and welcome back to the weekly horoscope, and this is for the week 23rd of February to the 1st of March, so we actually enter a new month. So there is less activity this week than last week, which is good to hear because of course last week we had the solar eclipse in Aquarius and also the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries at 0 degrees with the Chinese New Year, the fire horse. So a lot of new beginnings, a lot of planning and manifestation energy. So this week, things start to slow down and move backwards a little bit. On February the 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces. So we've been in the pre-shadow period for this retrograde since the 11th. So if you're thinking, I already feel like I've got some retrograde themes coming through, that's probably why. But this is the full-blown retrograde, and it's going to be moving backwards, retrograding, until the 20th of March. So we do have this for quite some time. As I mentioned before, Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, and that is because Mercury is all about speed. It is about communication, our thought. It's very, frenetic and energetic and motivated. And Pisces is more slow, more dreamy, a little bit more delusional, and moves like the water, so it can go like the tide, right? Whereas Mercury just wants to go like a lightning bolt. So it's kind of like lightning bolt meets a calm, dreamy river, all right? Yeah, that doesn't mean they're terrible. Again, it's great for compassionate energy, for creativity, for manifestation, but it's not necessarily very good for signing contracts, really speaking with conviction. So there's certain things where it's good, it's bad. That's why I always say that things are never good or bad. I say certain placements have like this sustained advantage, some of them have more of a temporary advantage. Sometimes they have a complete disadvantage and you're like, no, this is just going to be a difficult placement. This one I would say more just has more of a temporary disadvantage because there's things you can do with it, but overall it's just not something that I would put in my arsenal, my tool belt of skills. So Mercury retrograding, I'm going to show you on my little trusty whiteboard because I've had a few people say they really like this. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening. So we've got the sun now in Pisces. No freaking clue what the moon is right now. It's probably around here. Okay, doesn't really matter too much anyway because the moon moves every 2.5 days. So it's like this is not going to bother the Mercury retrograde that's going to be there for a whole month. So we've got this Mercury, right? And that is going to be retrograde. So put a little R on it, retrograde. What that means is instead of going forward like this, it's actually going backwards. So it moonwalks backwards. And what happens when you're trying to walk backwards? You're going to move a bit slower. You're generally more cautious because obviously if you backwards, you're going to trip over, smack your head. It's a whole thing, right? Moving forward, we can see we've got clarity. Direct motion is great. So that's why retrogrades get us to be more cautious and to reflect and think, because you have to think about every step when you're walking backwards. You have to think, okay, I can't actually see what's coming. I could trip over a boulder. So when retrogrades happen, that backwards motion gets us to be more cautious and to think more. And because Mercury is all about communication, we're ultimately reflecting and thinking on overdrive. So there's a common misconception that when Mercury is direct, we're thinking, everything is fast and direct, but not necessarily, because this is more of a reflective period. And because Pisces is all about imagination, the imagination becomes the weapon, right? That's when it's like, okay, it's very easy to get upset by delusion, to say, what if? But also to jump to conclusions and to not believe things. Again, it's all in the membrane, right? It's staying in the membrane. So it's really important to remember to keep your feet planted on the floor and to be very cautious about the steps that you take as we are walking backwards now. Okay, February 27th, we actually have Mars in Aquarius, which is here, and that is going to be squaring Uranus and Taurus. So Mars is more of an inner planet. So that's more about our personality and some of our motivations. And Uranus, of course, is external. So when internal meets external, that's normally something where you really have to react to something coming at you. So this is very impulsive, this energy. It can make you feel very reckless. And it tends to be an energy where it's my way or the highway, right? And I think with this energy, especially because we've got Uranus in Taurus already debilitated, it definitely feels like I am going to have an argument because I just feel like getting it all out, you know, kind of feel like I'm just going to have an argument for the sake of it, really. And because Mercury's already in retrograde, that's going to be the bigger issue, right? It's like saying things, then being like, oh, maybe I didn't think about that. So again, every time we're, you know, having a very deep conversation, or we're trying to broach a topic that's quite sensitive, or even just something where it's like, you never put this back in the fridge, what are the consequences to this as I'm moonwalking backwards, right? On the same day, we've got Mercury in Pisces, this one, now retrograde, and that's going to be conjunct Venus, as you can see here. These are together. So that's much nicer, actually. Even though Mercury is retrograde, it's better for expressing your feelings on a very heartfelt way. So again, more compassionate, more creative. Venus is all about love and harmony and beauty, and obviously much more about creative expression. And then Mercury put that together. Again, it's not a contract. I'm going to sign up X amount of clients. You know, I'm launching a brand. It's not any of that. It's about compassion. It's about almost putting all of your feelings on the table, but in a, this is my feelings, right? Not a, I'm trying to get this across. So I've always said, especially for people like Virgos who have this in their 7th house, you really need to be more about action than words. So there are many ways to get your feelings out that are not words, right? So think about that. Okay, so let's see how this affects all the rising signs, beginning with Aries rising. So February the 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the 12th house. I've already talked about how this particular transit can manifest in red flags and missing them, because Pisces is very delusional. And I also think it's very smart. So in a way, it feels like ultimate denial, not that you don't see them, but that you see them and you're just kind of choosing to ignore them. Of course, when Mercury retrogrades in the 12th house, there is more of a focus on your mental health, and also a bit of a consideration for shadow work, some of the deeper meanings in life. And I would also personally say that you need to remember that with that 12th house, which is very hidden, very foggy, that you are not making decisions based on this feels good to me and it's overindulgent. You want to really focus on, this is something that my heart and my intuition is calling out for me to do, rather than I just feel like it. And the reason why is because February the 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in your 11th house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 2nd house, and that's now direct. So this is very impulsive, especially when it comes to spending money and going out with friends and saying, I'm going to go to a concert, I'm going to spend $300 on this, and actually I'm in my overdraft. So there is a sense of, I can see there's bad things on the horizon, but I'm choosing to ignore it. So just be a little bit more sensible this week is my advice. On the same day, of course, Mercury in Pisces, now retrograde conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 12th house. So that is really lovely for, you know, manifestation and focusing on romance. And some people ask me, should I manifest during a Mercury retrograde? I don't think it's a good idea. Okay, I'm going to put this into context for you. We have 3 Mercury retrogrades this year, all in water signs. Okay, so Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. And they take up a bulk with the pre-shadow and the post-shadow. There is really only about 2-3 months where you're not in a retrograde cycle for Mercury because of all the effects. So what are you going to do? Not manifest your whole year? I don't think that's true. And anyone who knows me knows that I think you manifest all the time, because every time we think a thought, we're manifesting, right? So when I say manifestation, don't get my words twisted and say, because it's a Mercury retrograde, I can't manifest. Yeah, you can. You can. Especially because Venus is in Pisces as well, which is exalted and works really well for compassion. Again, for you, Aries, I would say focus a lot more on being more sensible this week, especially with finances and friendships. Maybe also not saying something to a friend that's going to knock you off kilter, and just be more considerate. If you are a Taurus, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your 11th house. And so this definitely feels a bit like when you walk past a group of girls and they start laughing and you're like paranoid that they're laughing at you. You're like, what are you laughing at? It feels very sort of like, jumping to conclusions with groups of people that I'm working with in friendships, where you almost have a crisis of, can I trust this person? It's not like you shouldn't be expecting betrayal by any means, but it's almost I think my thoughts are getting away with me. Imagination is sort of almost trying to self-sabotage me. So just be mindful that your thoughts are not always real. February 27th, Mars in Aquarius in the 10th house is actually squaring Uranus and Taurus in your 1st house. So this is very impulsive when it comes to doing something reckless with authority and rebelling against authority, because Mars in Aquarius generally likes to do that anyway. And then Uranus and Taurus is like, let's screw things up, especially for me, right? By me, I mean like identity, not me, myself. Like, I'm not doing that. So you need to make sure that you are being very sensible, right? I'm going to say it's for all zodiac signs because that's kind of what the transit is telling you to do. But you need to have a plan if you want to go in and speak to a boss or speak to an authority figure, a teacher, whatever, and say something and contest an issue, and then you don't really know where it's going to go after that, okay? Remember, we're in the Mercury retrograde period now. It's like not even pre-shadow, it's the Mercury retrograde period, right? Super strong. So everything you say is going to have meaning to it, especially in Pisces, because Pisces is very poetical and everything has meaning. And on the same day, Mercury in Pisces, which is retrograde, is conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 11th house. So it's one of those days where you want to get your emotions out and you feel like, you know, you will be understood if you do get your emotions out, but it's all about having a plan to do it. It's just not a spontaneous day for, I'm going to go for it and tell them how I feel. There's times to do that and there's times to not do that. And you'll know intuitively when this is just not the time to do it, okay? And it's a bit like a film when someone blurts something out and it's like, ooh. And I say this for all Mercury retrogrades, but particularly in Pisces, yeah, you might want to steer clear of that one. If you are a Gemini, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the 10th house. Hopefully you're watching as a Gemini rising, and if so, you're ruled by Mercury. So this is always going to affect you a little bit more because not only is it retrograde, but Mercury is debilitated in Pisces. So it kind of hits you double whammy. You want speed, you want efficiency, you want to be able to sort of even overthink things a little bit. But when the Mercury retrogrades in Pisces, it's a real struggle for you. Again, it's also this mutable sign. So it's hitting your 10th house of career and authority and public persona. This means that you're more vulnerable and sensitive to things that are hitting your public image. So when a boss critiques you, for example, when you have to give a presentation, or when you're going out to the supermarket and you feel like everyone's looking at you and you're like, oh, I hate this, right? It's just overly emotional and overly sensitive when it comes to people who are viewing you and when you're putting yourself out there into the world. I'm being a little bit vague with that because I have all sorts of people that watch me who are retired, they don't have a job, and I don't want to keep saying, well, it's definitely your boss, because you might be like, babe, I ain't got a boss. So it's all about the public perception and your talents and what you're trying to put out there. When it's retrograding Mercury, it's not going to be helpful because it's going to be like putting everything in the air, and you don't need that right now. You need to be straight on the ground. February 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in your 9th house, which is squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 12th house. So this is quite impulsive when it comes to maybe booking a holiday or doing something very spontaneous, or maybe even voicing a controversial opinion that upsets somebody. So it's really important, again, because of the Mercury retrograde, to evaluate the consequences of what you are saying. It feels like I'm going to say this for everybody, and I'm probably going to get a comment saying, you say this for everybody, but I'm trying to apply it to different areas in your life based on the chart. But of course, this is just a general reading. I don't have your personal birth chart to be like, oh, it's exactly this. So again, take what resonates with this one. On the same day, Mercury in Pisces now retrograde is conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 10th house. So this is quite good for expressing some authenticity and wanting to feel understood by, say, an authority figure, particularly a mother figure, but then also not mincing or twisting your words. It's more of a, I'm trying to show you this feeling in various creative ways. If you are a Cancer, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the 9th house, so fellow water sign. So this is when imagination really becomes a weapon for you. And by that, I mean it feels like you can get very easily angry at people's opinions about your life and your choices. You might even get angry at your own opinions. You're like, why am I always viewing it this way? Why is my trauma coming out this way? And actually, you might jump to conclusions a lot. You want to remember as well with the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, if you're a student, to double check essays, exams, and assignments that you have to submit, because of course this is the time when technology plays up, and of course in the 9th house of higher education, academia, you just want to be a bit more mindful about that. Even with legal issues, don't be signing any contracts. February the 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in the 8th house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 11th house. So this is very impulsive, and actually it feels a bit like a power struggle between you and a group of people. And again, because of the Mercury retrograde in the 9th house, it feels like you're fighting some kind of institution, or you're fighting maybe like a small sect of people that ultimately are saying no. Imagine you're like submitting a paper to somebody, right? And there's 3 editors and 2 said yes and 1 said no. It's like, why is the one person saying no? And it kind of gets frustrating, because then you want to act out, you kind of want to smash through. And again, it's about centering and being calm. On the same day, Mercury in Pisces now retrograde is conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 9th house. So that does kind of manifest in a feeling of wanting to be authentic and understood, but it feels like you're fighting against the tides a little bit this week. You might just want to evaluate what is pushing back against you. Again, the phrase "I need to pick my battles" is really strong for you, Cancer. If you are a Leo, then you survived the Aquarius eclipse last week. So February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your 8th house. So this is really quite fantastical, you know, a lot of imaginative energy, a lot of sort of, spooky energy actually. And so you could definitely jump to conclusions with a partner when it comes to like a power struggle. They say something, you're like, I don't agree. There can also be some issues with finances, particularly taking loans out or trying to pay debt off. So be mindful if you have a deadline where you've got to pay a big chunk of money off, that it's probably better to drip feed that rather than putting all in one, because there could be an issue in regards to that. February 27th, we have Mars in Aquarius in your 7th house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 10th house. This is very important when it comes to being reckless with an authority figure or even a mother when it comes to a relationship or clients and people that you're working with one-on-one. The problem is, because of Mercury retrograde, it's not a good time to try to sign contracts or to get clients on your side. The reason why I'm giving you two different options here is because some people are single, so it's not going to apply to them. And I also don't want to sit here for 10 minutes being like, well, it could be also this. You'll know what it resonates for. And hopefully, you know, people that watch me have a little bit of astrology knowledge, so they know that when I say 7th and 10th house, generally what that applies to. But you have to, regardless of whatever it applies to, you have to understand that it's not a good time to fight, because Mars in Aquarius it's got a little bit too much lip, in my opinion. And then Uranus and Taurus already debilitated with a Mercury retrograde in Pisces. I don't need the hassle, right? On the same day, Mercury in Pisces that's retrograde is conjunct Venus in Pisces in that 8th house. So this is actually really good for intimacy and bonding compassionately with action. Actually quite nice time to, you know, do the physical touch, acts of service. But again, it's not I'm going to profess my love to you. You can do. I don't really care. But I do think that if you're going to let it all out, you've got to do it strategically, and it's got to be more about motion than it is about words. If you are a Virgo, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the 7th house for you. There's 3 reasons why this is very important for you, Virgo, especially Virgo rising. One is that you're ruled by Mercury, so retrograde is always going to affect you. Second is Mercury is debilitating in Pisces, so then it's like double whammy. Third, it's in your 7th house of committed relationships, so it is in opposition to your rising sign. So it's like bam, 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 like your man, right? A lot of stuff going on. Virgo, I've mentioned quite a few times that this is not a time for words of affirmation and getting it all off your chest. It's better for action and acts of service. That is because the 7th house is all about romance, and you want to be able to utilize the energy of Venus being in Pisces right now because it's conjunct Mercury in Pisces, but you also don't want to say something that then kind of jilts that. So it's about action and acts of service and gift giving, even physical touch, definitely physical touch. So if you want to get it all out and you want to say like, I really want to meet somebody, or I want to, you know, extend my bond to this person, you need to think strategically about it. Because we know that you're already Mercury ruled, you overthink things like no one else. So when you say something and then someone goes, oh, imagine you told somebody, I love you, and they go, Afghan, I don't love you. Okay, wasn't the reaction I was expecting, right? But then if I did an action where I was like, oh, this is kind of thought, oh, thanks so much, that's so, you know, there's different ways of doing it, right? There's different ways of approaching it. And personally, I feel that with Pisces and Virgo energy, there's just a fundamental clash with these two. They're sister signs, but they really clash. It's not like something like Gemini and Sagittarius, where I think actually they're almost twin signs. This is like, no, you're like distant cousin signs, right? I think you're actually not the same at all. So it's about approaching it strategically because of the retrograde. February 27th, we have Mars in Aquarius in your 6th house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 9th house. This is super impulsive when it comes to wanting to change up your environment and your routine a little bit more, especially if you're like, I'm bored, I've got cabin fever and I'm going stir crazy, I just need to get out. But of course, I've had this before, book a trip to LA. Well, where's the $2,000 just gone? So it's all about being a little bit more responsible, especially because Saturn's in your 8th house, which is saying, oh, I need to be a little bit more responsible about finances and actually, you know, do things on a whim. And of course, as I mentioned, Mercury in Pisces conjunct Venus in Pisces as well in your 7th house. If you are a Libra, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your 6th house. So this is when there could be some issues with inflammation and the lymphatic drainage system in your body. So if you have something where you have inflammatory disease or some kind of autoimmune issue, there is definitely a good time to get a massage and to keep mind of it. This is because Pisces tends to rule things around the feet, especially if you've got deep vein thrombosis, but also the lymphatic system. It also rules things like the pineal gland as well. So this means that everything kind of comes upwards. That's why people say when you have a lot of fluoride, you're like their eye closes because it's affecting the pineal gland. When Mercury retrogrades, it moves backwards, it tends to affect these things. We always say it's technology and things around the house, but it also can affect the body. That's because Mercury also is about productivity and the way that we're moving through things. So even though it's not Mars, it is still going to affect those elements. So just be mindful. Again, this is not like a prediction of you're going to have this problem. It's just keep an eye on it because it can flare up when Mercury retrogrades in Pisces, because again, already debilitated. You could also find that you have some arguments with co-workers and you also have issues with your routine. You just can't feel like it's right for you. Sleep could be all over the shop personally. So again, I think it's a good time to start focusing more on your physical health. I know Libras hate that because we spent all last year focusing on physical health, but sometimes it does flare up every so often, and it's good just to kind of have a little check-in. Maybe even use it as a, how do I feel now compared to what I was doing last year, and what can I continue to do to make this more healthy? February 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in the 5th house. That is squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 8th house. This is very impulsive when it comes to like pleasure and hedonism, in my opinion. It feels Mars and Aquarius in the 5th house are already a bit sexy, and then Uranus and Taurus in the 8th house, where it's like, ooh, a bit of a power struggle here. Definitely could be trying to rebel or trying to get one up, but ultimately I feel like you don't actually care. It's almost like doing something out of like, don't let pride get in the way, and my ego's sort of just front and center. So if there's a situation in your life where you're trying to just win for the sake of it, because why not? I think that you'll actually realize, especially with Mars being in Aquarius in the 5th house, you don't really care. It's just because, well, I kind of feel like I want to win this situation. No one really cares. On the same day, Mercury in Pisces is conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 6th house. So this is actually really nice for acts of service and physical touch, gift giving, and, giving out compassion in that way. But again, as I've mentioned, for every sign, not the best for words of affirmation, particularly in the 6th house, really good for acts of service and being like, here, I baked you a cake. Or my love, If you are a Scorpio, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in a fellow water sign in Pisces in your 5th house. So Scorpio rising, I've mentioned a few times on my TikTok that I've actually found this one to be very red flag. Very sort of, okay, we're being in denial. You and Aries in denial. And the reason being is that the 5th house is all about dating and romance, and it's actually really quite lovely, Pisces. But the problem is when Mercury is retrograding in that sign, it can be like, oh, I am going to ignore the red flags. I'm going to take a risk, and then I'm not going to understand why I've done something that actually has detrimental consequences. And detrimental might sound like a bit too harsh of a word, but when something just goes like, this is not how I planned, basically, unexpected. So you need to remember to be a little bit more sophisticated, a bit more sensible with this particular transit. You might also find that you are one of the signs in which an ex comes back. I don't like to say for certain that exes will come back, but normally with the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, particularly in the 5th house, you might have feelings about an ex. Again, they don't have to come back physically. It depends on other aspects in your personal chart. This is why you can never really predict it properly. Let's look at your chart and say, oh yes, this is definitely happening. But you might have shades to it. You might start thinking about it. Sometimes I get it where I dream about a person a lot. They don't come back into your life, but you're like, why am I dreaming about them? What's going on? Think about this person a lot at the moment. So that kind of energy comes through. February the 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in the 4th house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 7th house. So this is going to be quite impulsive when it comes to a relationship and a feeling of stability and almost interrupting the peace that you have built. So again, if we link this to a potential ex coming back, it's like, why are you coming back now when I'm peaceful and everything is fine? Again, if you're like, I don't want to ever hear from an ex again, this probably won't apply to you. But if you're like in the midst of a situationship or someone in and out the door, they've got one foot in and one foot out, then this may be a potential person coming back. There's also a sense with this particular aspect that you don't necessarily want to keep the peace because you're tired of keeping the peace, and the person or group of people or institution or whatever that you're fighting with also feels that way. So it's just kind of at loggerheads. So I don't think you need that energy personally. On the same day, Mercury in Pisces now retrogrades conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 5th house. So this is why I'm saying I think there's some kind of romantic energy that is from the past here. Definitely not a, oh, we were committed, we were together for ages. It's more of a, oh, I go want to put that clip in again from Sex and the City where it's like, who is this? I don't even know this person. I dated you once and like, why are you back again? You know, or like having the feeling of, did I screw up this particular relationship when actually I should have done this? There's just a lot of contemplative energy about relationships for you this week, Scorpio. And again, if you're not in a relationship and you're like, no, it doesn't apply to me, never dated in my life, then it's going to be a lot more about your creative pursuits and the way that you're expressing yourself authentically. And that can be for multiple things. That can be for your hobbies, your, friendships, your family, but also it can be focused on what you find fun and what is entertaining you, specifically when it comes to, I'm in a rut and I need to find something that really stimulates me. If you are a Sagittarius, then February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your 4th house. So as a mutable sign, this will affect you. So this is the house where I'm going to say things are going to go wrong quite specifically. And again, not everything goes wrong with a Mercury retrograde, but you just have to be a bit more considerate and more cautious. So because Pisces rules things like gas and oil, in the 4th house, normally things like the boiler goes, and of course things like the fridge, or you could even have it when you've left the door ajar on the freezer overnight and things have melted and everything's gone. You've got to redo the whole thing. So just be mindful of things going wrong in the house during this time, because as Mercury moves backwards, you just have to be more cautious, particularly because of this Pisces energy already debilitated, and it rules quite important resources like the boiler, right? Like oil, like when you go to put the oven on, it's like, whoa. Again, there's also logic to this, right? If you've got an old boiler, you've got an old oven that's falling apart, then you might think, okay, Mercury retrograde might push that on. But if you've got something that's brand new and it just breaks out of nowhere, that's when you're like, okay, I know astrologically something's going on, right? Because nobody could put two and two together, it's not the retrograde, that thing is old. But if you had something where you just bought it and you're like, it's already broken, this doesn't make any sense, that's when the retrograde does that. Might also find that you're at loggerheads with family members as well, or you're not getting your point across. Not a good time to have those family workshops where you're like, hey, why did you traumatize me as a child? No, I wouldn't be doing that. February 27th, Mars in Aquarius in the 3rd house is squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 6th house. So this is very important when it comes to communication. Already a Mercury retrograde. Yeah, and I'm not Sag rising, but I'm a Sag sun. We're blunt. We say it and then we're like, can't walk that one back, right? So I just be very careful when it comes to having a specific communication with co-workers, particularly double checking emails, but also making sure that you are keeping on top of your physical routine, because Mars and Aquarius is going to deal with some of the daily stuff that you do, and then Uranus and Taurus in that 6th house is going to try and throw a curveball with the routine you've established for physical health and sleep and whatnot. So it could feel like your routine is just up in the air and you're not sleeping very well. If you are a Capricorn rising like myself, then February the 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the 3rd house. Okay, Mercury retrograde in Pisces, already bad enough because Mercury is debilitated. Then it has to be in the house that Mercury rules, so it's all about communication. Great. I'm a Mercury in Sagittarius. Do I need this? No, because mine is in detriment. So yeah, this is not very good when it comes to presenting, having an interview. Again, you got to live your life. So please don't take my words of, oh, my interview is going to be terrible. It's not that. You just have to think strategically. So because Pisces is all about imagination, it's creative, you just have to get a little bit more creative, okay? Tell a story. So for example, if you're doing an interview, you might not want to focus on statistics of, I increased this company's turnover by 80%, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. It's got to be, well, actually, this is what I did. I was able to, create this thing so that people can get home to their kids quicker. And that's what's really important to me, right? So focusing on a story and a narrative a little bit more. So again, it's not like you can't do anything. It's just, this is why we use astrology for strategic advantage. It's about thinking about things differently. So when I did my PhD Viva, I had Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, right? Not only was that natal for me, but I knew, oh God, this is when people ramble, if you couldn't tell. I had the Viva based on a lot of questions were going to be asked about business and the economy. But I also thought, what does Mercury in Sag do? It tends to focus on philosophical beliefs, right? Maybe even controversial opinions. So maybe I need to focus more on cultural and philosophical debates. Most of the questions were pretty much all cultural and philosophical. So I'm really glad that I knew that. So that's why I'm saying it's not to be afraid of like, oh, I'm going to have a really bad argument with somebody, although that is possible with it in the third house. But it's more about how do I adapt and change the way I'm speaking for certain scenarios. February 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in the second house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the fifth house. This is very impulsive when it comes to spending money on like something that would make you feel happy. So again, in my mind, I'm like, do I go to Sedona? It's going to be really expensive, but I'm kind of feeling about it. So this is my way I'm resonating. But you also want to rebel against feeling like, oh, I have to save money. I'm in the drudgery. And you want to do something that makes you happy and go your own way. There's definitely a feeling because of Mars and Aqua always wanting to do something different, and then Uranus kind of like punching through there, that there is a potential to do something very risky in this fifth house, with Uranus in the fifth house. So just be mindful to have a plan, make sure that the finances add up, make sure that it's going to be benefiting you, and actually you're not going to, for example, do something that you thought was going to be really luxurious and pleasurable, and then you're like, actually, I regret it now I'm there, you know? Like when I go to a concert and I get there and I think, freaking, when is this thing going to end? My back's hurting. That kind of thing. If you're an Aquarius rising, then last week we had the Aquarius solar eclipse in your first house. Some people might have felt the themes quite dramatically, others not. If you have like a 2-degree Aquarius rising, you might not have felt it much at all. But if you have like 26-degree Aquarius rising, you might be like, yeah, this was right on the money. Or just depends. So February 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the second house. So this is a very delusional energy when it comes to finances, luxury, and what you're being overly confident with. So it's really important that if you are spending money on something, that it's going to edify you creatively, and it's going to be something that actually adds to what you're valuing. So I would not be spending thoughtlessly. I would be spending money on something that makes me feel happy and that I can see as something that represents who I am. So for example, because I've got Mars and Aquarius in my second house right now, I bought this beautiful ring and this, not expensive at all. And I really don't buy myself much. Jewelry is one of my things that I really love. And I was like, okay, but this is not thoughtless to me because A, it wasn't expensive, so it's not going to cause a crack in my finances. Second, I think it's absolutely beautiful and just so aesthetic. Like this, that could be a wedding ring in my opinion. But also it represents who I am. You know, I've got this cool kind of astrology focus thing here. And I'm like, it represents who I am. Doesn't break the bank, but I enjoy it and it makes me feel good. So it's something along those lines where what you are doing with finances can make you feel confident, but you're not being reckless and thoughtless. You might also find during this time, it's not a good time to take out a loan, sign a contract, or make a very pivotal decision when it comes to finances. February 27th, we have Mars and Aquarius in your first house, squaring Uranus and Taurus in the fourth house. Very reckless when it comes to having an argument with a family member, especially because you've got Mercury retrograding in Pisces in that second house, which can deal with like root survival and root chakra. When we think about the roots, where do we come from? It deals with family. So sometimes that can cross over. So just be mindful of not going, trying to Hulk smash something with a family member, and it's just, you can't walk it back. So I would be mindful of that particularly. We do have Mercury in Pisces conjunct Venus in Pisces in the second house. So taking the retrograde aside, Venus in Pisces in the second house is really very lovely because it can actually bring harmony to finances. And I think it's actually one of those moments where it's to treat yourself. So again, linking that together, you can treat yourself, but you don't have to be like, well, I went out and bought myself like, you know, a Fendi handbag, and you're like, you can't afford a Fendi handbag, beloved. Please be mindful, you know? If you are a Pisces, then I've left the best to last because it's definitely an important week for you. So February the 25th, we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your first house. So Mercury is already debilitated in Pisces, with the retrograde does not help at all. So you might find that you're more paranoid during this time. You can't get your point across quite literally. Not a good time to tell people, this is who I am, right? It feels like you could get easily anxious over things and jump to conclusions. Just generally feeling like, Why are they saying that? What's going on here? Feeling a bit foggy, right? Because of course Pisces rules the 12th house, which is a bit foggy. And so that Mercury retrograde, which likes to be fast and speedy, is in a sign that doesn't like to do that. So it just feels at loggerheads with what you're doing. You might not feel really productive during this time. What I would say is, if you're not feeling productive, especially in business or work, to focus on things like hobbies and creative pursuits, reading, writing, journaling, focusing on things that can still make you feel productive. You're still doing something, but you're not necessarily on the go, you know? You're not like, we're launching this brand this week. It's like, no, maybe I need to actually focus on something else. So for example, if I want to write a book, maybe I don't feel productive in writing the book, but maybe I could read a few books and highlight some things I like, and then use that to kind of put in my notes. So then I feel like I'm being productive because I'm doing research, right? So it's just about adapting to what this retrograde brings. February 27th, Mars in Aquarius in the 12th house is squaring Uranus and Taurus in the 3rd house. So this is quite important when it comes to communication already. So this is why I'm warning you that you could be overly paranoid and be like, what do you mean by that? And it's like, hang on, I haven't got my words out yet. So just be mindful, because it's fighting for the sake of fighting. Mars and Aquarius in your 12th house already. Mars does not do well in the 12th house because it's diluted. So then it feels like throwing a punch and it doesn't connect. God, those birds are really loud outside. I had a bird on my bedroom window this morning. They're trying to tell me something. I'm like Snow White. But basically, Mars in Aquarius in the 12th house specifically feels like when you're in a dream and you go to punch someone and it doesn't connect, and you're like, why can't it connect? So the punch is there, but it isn't going to connect. And when you have Uranus in the 3rd house, it's because it's like someone's going to move away. My analogies are terrible lately, but you know what I mean? It's just not going to connect, and it ain't worth it. On the same day, Mercury in Pisces is conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 1st house. So Venus and Pisces in the 1st house, making you very magnetic and attractive. So that actually adds some nice harmony. Oh, my throat's going. This adds some nice harmony because what the fuck is going on? Sorry, I don't know what my voice was from there. It adds a harmony because you can go after things that you want, you can manifest. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't manifest during a Mercury retrograde, because we pretty much only have 3 months of the year left to manifest that. That's bullshit. No. So you can do what you want here creatively, and you can express yourself, and you can go after opportunities. But again, just think strategically about that Mercury retrograde in your 1st house of self. Okay, that was the wrap up for the weekly horoscope. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, these are just general themes that might happen. So obviously, if I had your birth chart, I'd be like, okay, this is how it's definitely going to impact you. Also, don't live your life by astrology. You know, if you have an interview or you want to say something, don't let a Mercury retrograde stop you. You just have to be mindful that it might not come across the way that you're expecting. So you might have to be like, oh no, what I meant by that is, and just sort of add extra fluff to things. Okay, I'll see you for the video on the Virgo eclipse. I hope you have a wonderful week. Much love.